Ever find yourself in a situation where you've just been injured, and instead of addressing your injuries, you run back after the person or the object that hurt you and demand to know why it happened? Probably not, right? Then why do we do this when it comes to our emotional wounds? I want to talk to you today about how destructive this way of thinking is to our self-love walk and overall well-being. I've taken a few too many journeys down this harmful path, and I cannot wait to share some of the things I learned along the way. So if this topic speaks to you, let's wade out together into some of the deeper water and get going. In today's episode, you'll learn how recovery is fueled by self-love that prioritizes healing. You'll hear some cautionary tales about the dangers of refusing help when it's needed, and you'll gain some strategies to apply to your own healing journey. Here's a shameless plug before we get going. If you enjoy this episode or this show, consider leaving a 5-star written review on Apple. This show could use a little love in that area right now to help grow its visibility. The link to the Apple show, if that's not where you're listening to it right now, is in the show notes below. Do you crave better self-esteem and confidence but feel stuck in a fog of uncertainty? If you're ready to gain clarity on your goals and cut yourself free from the fear, self-doubt, and worry holding you back, this show is for you. I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award-winning author, speaker, and clarity coach. I help women like you restore their inner worlds and get clear on their goals to confidently fulfill their greatest desires. Ready to restore your inner warrior? Then turn off those distractions and tune in to this next episode. So in previous episodes, we've explored the importance of knowing why behind things. And in next week's episode, we are going to wrestle with that why question again from the perspective of sometimes we do need to know why something happened. But today I want to focus on how sometimes that why is not the most important thing. Sometimes it isn't important at all to the larger picture. But yet we find ourselves when we are wounded hyper-focusing on that area, and then we just kind of get stuck. So I want you to think about, like, let's say you're in the woods and a wild animal attacks you. And, in this instance, it's kind of an easy answer because the wise thing might not be to go run back into the woods and confront the animal once you've already gotten back to safety. And maybe if you got a park ranger, that ranger probably still wouldn't hold your hand, take you back into the woods and confront the wild animal. It is a futile attempt. First of all, wild animals can't talk. Second of all, there might be a couple things that you can figure out about why the attack might have happened. Like maybe you got confronted by a bear because it was mama bear with baby cubs. Maybe you had food. There's all kind of things. Maybe it's just the bear's nature to actually attack you when you're alone in the woods. The ranger, when you come in all wounded, is probably going to be very focused on one thing, the fact that you're injured, and they're going to do whatever they can to help you get the right medical attention for that. And this is a really simple analogy and a good reminder to reflect back on whenever we get tempted to try to run back into the woods and chase the person or the thing that wounded us, is to consider that the most important thing that we can do for ourselves in that moment of our woundedness and our injuries is to assess the damage and then address the wounds. So these things go hand in hand, but aside from that, this doesn't just apply to physical injuries, it also applies to emotional injuries. Even if you later on go back in to the experience and confront people or seek justice, or all those different things, which I do explore in other episodes, in the moment that you are dealing with the actual wound or injury itself, you have to be single focused. And that has to be selfishly on yourself and on dealing with those wounds and dealing with that injury. So I had a really interesting analogy that I brought into my book, and I love this analogy. And a lot of readers write back to me, or sometimes when I'm in interviews on other podcast shows, they'll say, "Oh my God, I love that gangrene story." And so I'm like, okay, this kind of applies to what we're talking about today. So I'm just going to read it right out of the book. And if you're interested in more about Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free, my self-help book, you can find a link for it in the show notes below. So when it comes to overcoming grief, and I'm going to add here woundedness, confronting it allows your entire healing process to happen quicker. I don't just say this because it sounds good. I say this because I would give anything to go back in my own life and reapproach my grief with a recovery mindset. By the time I figured out that burying my grief didn't kill it and only hindered my total recovery, I felt cheated. Cheated that I prolonged and perpetuated my suffering, cheated out of living with true peace, cheated from living my freest, most empowered life, cheated out of all the time and energy I lost. That's right. You still invest time and energy. When you avoid thinking and talking about the emotions you're experiencing from surviving any type of trauma, then you eventually must invest time and energy to work through these emotions when they will no longer stay buried in that internal graveyard. At that point, these emotions are infected with bitterness and other toxic thoughts that require additional time and attention to resolve. Not to mention how damaging these toxins are to other areas of our life. Can you imagine if we operated the same way with physical injuries? What would happen if you cut your foot and the only care you offered this wound was the shower you took right after you injured it? Days later, when the pain intensifies and the cut gets infected, you tell yourself to ignore it and that you've suffered worse pain. Mind over matter, you repeat as the wound throbs and itches. Eventually, you wake up and notice the pain has diminished. You think the infection worked itself out naturally, only to discover a swollen, angry, foul-smelling lesion a few days later. Now you must break down and visit a doctor who tells you it's turned to gangrene and your foot must be amputated to save your life. Say what? We don't rationalize and handle physical injury this way because it's detrimental to our health. Why then do so many of us rationalize and handle psychological injury as if ignoring it is how it gets better? Not only does this approach stifle or drastically slow your healing process, but it also affects your daily functions and interactions with others. While you might think your buried emotions don't disturb your outward attitudes, they do. What do you think will happen after your festered toxic bitterness seeps into your relationships? I'll tell you what happens. You become the gangrene. People cut you from their lives because no one can chance that stink infecting them too. You might even begin to irritate yourself. Sometimes we need help when we've been hurt, and we may need to set aside our pride in order to do that. The help that we need, we may have all those tools at our disposal and all the knowledge to know what to do. And then there will be the instances where we actually need to call in some reinforcements, where we actually need some new prescribed treatment patterns or prescriptive aids or, you know, another wise voice speaking into our situation. There's no gold medal at the end of our trials and tribulations, yet sometimes we're so proud as we're struggling through it, we can do it on our own, that we forget we don't have to. And we forget that sometimes it will go so much smoother and will come out so much better if we just apply these helps in all these different areas that we need them. And the reason why I want to emphasize this is because I was talking to someone recently and I kind of sensed this pride kind of rising up, this idea that we're just going to turn away help when we need it or refuse the help when it doesn't quite fit the image that we had in our head of how that help should play out or how that help should look. Like, first of all, most of the time when you're in a situation and you don't know what to do, so you need help, you don't know what it's supposed to look like. So it makes zero logical sense to have this fantasized, image in your head of how you think that should play out when you haven't a clue, and that's why you need the help to begin with. So there's another story in Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free. I'll just give you the quick version. I'm sure you heard before about the man who's waiting for help from God, and in his perception, he never gets it. So he gets caught up in this flash flood and he's being carried away by these rapid waters, and he passes by a tree. It's just, conveniently in his path. He passes by the tree and he kind of like gets caught on it, and there's branches that are sticking up. So he's like holding on to the middle of the trunk. The water's freezing. And then, sometime later goes by, and then a kayak comes flashing by, and he like grabs it, and he's like, he's holding on, he's trying not to let go, and he's like, wow, cool kayak. I used to have one like this when, I was younger. Lets it go, right? Surrenders it to the water. Next, these two guys in a canoe up, and they're like, hey, do you want us to take you to safety? And the guy's like, no, no, help's on the way. Okay, I prayed about it. Helps on the way. And then this helicopter comes overhead and it's like super loud, and some guy slides down. It's like, hey, buddy, like, hook this on you. Let's get you out of here. And the guy's like, no, no, man, like, help's on the way. And the guy's like, what? He's like, no, no, I got this. Help's on the way. And then, boom, he ends up drowning. And he gets to heaven and he's like, God, I prayed for you to come help me. Well, how come you just left me to die? And God's like, let me go through all the ways that I tried to help you. And he goes back. I put a tree in your path so that you could actually climb out to safety until the storm passed by. But you chose to stay in the water and try to hold on for dear life. Then I sent the kayak and you sent that away. Then you sent the canoers away. And then I sent my best guys and you sent them away also. I cannot help you if you do not help yourself with whatever help does get sent your way. What a great reminder, right? So, a loved one was scrutinizing me several years ago when my first book was coming out, and I was openly talking about my trauma, which obviously doing that in my first book led to the second book. So, I don't question God anymore. I just follow the lead. I'll just write about these tough things. But she really wanted to understand why I was first talking about it, but then willing to share it with the whole world. It's like almost like wearing your badge of shame out in public, like a scarlet letter. And first of all, I want to emphasize one thing right here. You are not defined by the bad things that happen to you, and you should not be ashamed of the bad things that happen to you. So it doesn't matter, like, if you get hurt, I got it, like you jump out of a tree and you break your arm and you're like, yeah, that was an idiot move. It's not what I'm talking about here, but also accidents happen. Poor judgment happens. And so if we walk around hating ourselves or blaming ourselves for the bad things that happen to us all the time, then that's really a self-destructive pattern of living. And if there's any type of conviction or correction that you need to make from something that happens that got you hurt, then that's fine. That's a whole different thing. But I'm talking about in the majority of the time, you get hurt by someone else, your feelings get hurt, or someone actually does something cruel to you, and now you're stuck in a place where you've got to work through some things. And, maybe there's some physical injury involved in this as well. And so that was kind of my story and my background. And, I just told her, I was just sharing some of the brief, details of it. And she just said, my generation, we just sucked it up. It was no one's business what we'd been through. And I was kind of like, part of me was like, yeah, I've heard that before. And then another part of me was just rising up and it was just frustrating because I was like, yeah, oh, I sucked it up all right. I sucked it up so much that my eyeballs were burning from the toxins of it all. I had done the sucking up. And then that didn't work. And so eventually I had to do the hard work because I wasn't going to forget about taking things to the grave. I wasn't going to live my whole entire life feeling like I was already a walking dead person. That wasn't going to happen. So I knew that as my woundedness maybe started to compound and I wasn't addressing these injuries, that I was hurting myself the most. Of course, I was hurting other people too, because we can think about that gangrene thing, is that people will start to just cut you out of their lives as well. And it becomes really lonely when people start to cut you out of their lives. We need people. We need our people in our lives. Which brings me to one of the main reasons why I was like, you know what? I'm okay with writing these really tough stories and I'm okay with sharing them because I want women like you to know you're not alone. You're not alone in these things. You're not the only person that this has ever happened to. You are okay for feeling and struggling in all the ways that you are. You're not broken beyond repair, even though you might feel like you're broken beyond repair. Like, what's the point? And I wanted to belong in that sisterhood that I desperately needed when I was going through my own stuff. That wasn't telling me to suck it up. That was telling me, hey, you know what? There's hope at the other side of this. It was showing me, hey, by my own example, rise above this stuff. You can get past this stuff. You can heal from this stuff. And you may even come out stronger and, dare I say, more confident. And so, yes, I talk about all these things in a lot of the work. I mean, I'm wrestling with these things because the more I talk about them and the more I make people uncomfortable, the more I'm like, there's something really powerful here and something very broken in our humanity here that I will probably spend the rest of my life kind of wrestling through to try to understand better. And hopefully, I can bring some of this to you and it will help you also as you're wrestling with your own understandings of our broken humanity and your own brokenness and how to be whole. And so these are just a few of the really important motivating reasons behind why I write and talk about self-guided trauma recovery. But there's a warning here. I want to give you a disclaimer right up front. No one can do all the work for you. No one can just fix you. So we need to be actively engaged. We need to be an active participant in our own healing journey. Sometimes we need that outside help and support. A lot of times we need that outside help and support. We might not recognize that we're getting it. So if we're just talking to someone and they're just kind of listening, or maybe we feel like we're only just trying to dump it, like I just got to get this off my chest. I'm going out of my mind. And then maybe it's just one word they say, or maybe they don't say anything in that moment, but like the next time you talk about it, they have something really insightful to say because they've been meditating on it and really thinking about, God, it breaks my heart that you're suffering this way. And they know you. And so they're trying to also wrestle through your own struggles and your own wounds with you. And so, don't underestimate all of the really organic ways that help kind of plays out in our everyday lives. I think if you're struggling with that pride of, I don't need any help, you may be shocked if you just really psychoanalyzed some of your experiences that you're actually getting help in ways that you just didn't realize were help. And often those kind of like acts of help come when individuals around us see that we're not maybe taking those steps ourselves. And so I learned this myself going through many trials and errors that the biggest crime that we often commit against ourselves is that we neglect our basic care. We neglect ourselves, but at a really basic level. We start to not even be able to do the bare minimum. And then hopefully, eventually, we break down and we need that help. But how sick are we? How bad are our injuries? How bad are our wounds by the time we actually break down and realize, like, I need help? And so, these helps also come in the form of therapists and counselors, crisis intervention, like I had mentioned. My God, prayer. And prayer maybe early on. Like, sometimes the last thing we do is sit down and be like, oh, right, God, help me. But maybe praying at the beginning, wise counsel, and that comes in all different forms, which again is why it's so important for us to be able to give voice to our woundedness and to our grief and our trauma so that when we are speaking to people who have that wisdom that we would know how to tap into. Someone doesn't know how to speak into your life until they know how to speak into your life. And to do that, they got to learn a little bit about you. So we don't have to go around and trauma dump on everybody. That's not what I'm saying. But when people are genuinely interested in you and they're asking you questions, don't give them the insta perfect answers all the time, maybe. Of course, guide yourself, but there will be those instances where you've also got to like follow your instincts and say, you know what? I feel safe with this person. I'm going to tell them something. And then let yourself be blown away when you get that wise counsel from them. But there's also those prescriptive aids. And then, of course, self-help guides. So when you think about, we live in times where there are self-help options everywhere. I mean, everywhere there's a tutorial or a self-help book. There's memberships and groups and therapies, and there's all kind of things out there. Don't underestimate those things and don't put a number cap on how many things that you can bring in. It might be wise to just try one thing at a time, but it's okay if you already have a list or an idea of several things that you want to try to implement or you want to try to like look into, or if you are learning them as you go, but don't think you just need one or two things and like that's good enough. I don't want to be greedy. Like go ahead, be greedy about your own self-care and well-being. Be really, really greedy about that. How many things in your own life have died in much the same way? and they've left you with like missing parts of yourself. I know that probably just resonated with you because it's definitely something I'm very familiar with. And like that gangrene example, have parts of your identity or life been kind of amputated because you didn't tend to that woundedness or get help when you needed it? And if you just answered yes to that, all hope is not lost. Unlike the physical injury example, we always have a second chance to revisit, assess, and attend to our emotional wounds. That's the beautiful part. It's not like that these things actually turn to gangrene and we need to get them amputated. That's not what we're talking about here. But in a physical sense, yeah, you can get a prosthetic after you lose your foot, but you'll never get your foot back. So in the emotional realm, it's a little bit different. There's a little bit more hope because we can go back. The injury might be like deeply rooted at that point, but we can still expect to put in some work and get a full recovery, which is a pretty promising and incredible thing when you really, really let yourself think about that. There's no statute of limitations on it either. So it doesn't matter if it's something that happened a week ago or a year ago or 30 years ago. There's no limit on, oh, that's been too long ago. I can't deal with that. What you may notice if you start to kind of revisit something that's a little bit older is you'll probably notice that there's some compounded layers. And you want to know my secret? I'm the redo queen. I am not too proud to start over. I actually sometimes welcome the opportunity to start over. Then you can just scrap all that guilt and all of that, the shame that we start to carry around and the frustration that I just can't figure this out. I'm just not good enough. I'm not smart enough. All that stuff, we can just check it out the door. But every time we get to redo something, we don't start at the same place that we were the first time we tried it. We're a completely different person by the time we redo it. Even if we're starting the day after we started the first time, we're a different person. We have new knowledge. We have new analysis points, like what worked, what didn't work, what made you feel good, what made you feel awful. Where can I get support? Where can I expect to get support? We have all of that knowledge. Maybe you have some skills and actual tools and things now that you can utilize in the redo opportunity that you didn't have going into the first time or the second time or the third. It doesn't matter. So trial and error is just as vital to our emotional healing as this concept is to every area of our lives that shape and reshape us. Don't ever forget that. The trick is to learn to recognize when you need to adjust, when you need to make those changes, when you need to change your plans, or here's one, when you need to quit things that are clearly not working. Oh my gosh, am I the first person to tell you it's okay to quit? Sometimes we need to stop doing something, or we need to stop relying on certain forms of help, even if it's a person, if it isn't working. And that doesn't mean like, oh, I'm giving this a day. If it doesn't work, then that's it. You know. Come on, you're smart enough to know exactly what I'm talking about here. Is that when you just know it's not giving you the kind of results that you wanted, and you've given it some time, you've given it a couple weeks, you've given it a couple months, and you're like, it's still not producing any fruit. Maybe this is a bad tree. So that's what I mean about giving yourself permission to quit things that just aren't working for you, or maybe they're not serving your purposes anymore. So maybe something that was really, really helping you in the initial stages of your recovery aren't something that are as helpful now, and it's okay to stop utilizing those at the moment. And then you have to make those mental notes because you want to always keep building your repertoire of things that are helpful because there is no one formula that you're going to be able to master and then use like a template in every single situation. But there will be strategies and there will be tools and there will be people and support networks that work for you in different times. And you're going to want to remember those things so that when you have a new injury or new woundedness, which, sorry to say, spoiler alert, you're going to be wounded again. You're going to have your feelings injured again. And when you do, you're going to have all these things to consider. And you're going to remember, oh, that worked when? I was blah, blah, blah. That worked because these were the environmental conditions I was also navigating. So you have to keep those things in mind also. There will be things that you're like, never, one and done, never doing that again. And then the things that are like, well, I did it while it worked. And then I had to kind of like retire that one for now. And then, of course, not only are we always evolving, but so is the world around us. And so we also have to kind of keep our minds open to discovering new things to bring into our routine. And for the love of God, try them with an open mind. If you go into situations and say, oh, I'm going to try it because so and so said I have to, and you already believe in your heart it's not going to work, it's not going to help, chances are it's like a coin toss at that point. It may work, it may not, but you may be manifesting all the wrong energy and all the wrong outcomes by, already like believing that it's not going to work. And then you're not even giving it a full chance. You're just kind of like shuffling your feet, going through the motions. It's not the same as like being all in, putting yourself all in and saying, you know what? Like my whole life depends on me being able to work through this. And we really have to look at these things this way. My whole life depends on me being able to work through this stuff. And you're just going to have to keep lather, rinse, repeat, lather, rinse, repeat. Whatever those wound care practices are, you already have them. So no one can take those away from you. You have them and you can just pull them out and go through your processes every time you need to do that. And I hope you picked up on my theme here that we have to try things to learn what will and will not work for us. We also have to match our wound care with the wound itself. So your challenge this week, if you're not struggling through something right now, is to maybe just journal and reflect on maybe what are the areas of helps or what are your current strategies for working through your own emotional injuries and woundedness, and see if any of them align with some of the things we talked about today, and get yourself just primed at least. Obviously, if you're working through some woundedness, try some of this stuff out. But I really want to get into this exploring the why next week, and you might get more from the episode if you've already thought through some of these things that I'm inviting you to do. So until we meet again, I believe in you and I see you, and I know you are going to do great things with your life. Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, follow my channel and share it with friends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. And if you're ready to get clarity and big picture vision on your goals, consider booking a one-on-one coaching session with me. Find a link in the show notes below to book a session. And as you go through your week, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Saturday. Ciao.